of Money in Motion video blog. This is Dan Perkins. Today I want to talk about what everybody else is talking about, and that is the sequester that's supposed to take place on March the 1st. I think it's important to make sure that at least you as my clients understand the activity that's going on. To understand sequester, one has to look back into the summer of 2011 when we were having a crisis on the debt ceiling. And Congress and the President agreed that they needed to do something about the debt, the ballooning debt and the ballooning deficit. So the Congress passed legislation that created a special committee with representatives of the House and the Senate to come up with a solution to deal with the rising deficit. And so they also put in a provision that if the joint committee can't come up with solutions, then there will be automatic budget cuts to the tune of about $1.2 trillion beginning in January of 2013, conveniently after the presidential election. So the Joint Committee couldn't do anything, and as a result, the sequester of $1.2 trillion of tax revenue and expenditures was to take place January the 1st. Now, I took you back in time because I think I also need to take you back to the beginning of the first Obama term. In the time that the president has been president, the House and the Senate have yet to pass an administration budget. That means that the government is operating on what is called baseline budgeting. I did a blog on this maybe a year or so ago, but it's worth repeating. Baseline budgeting is a process by which every department of the government's budget will increase automatically between 6 and 8% per year if Congress does nothing. So in the 4 years that the president has been in office, and the failure of the Senate to pass any budget means that the federal expenditures have gone up 24% over the last 4 years. In the current proposed administration budget of $3.6 trillion, there is approximately $240 billion of baseline budgeting increases to support the federal government in its activities. Now, why is that important? It's important because if I look at the sequester of $1.2 trillion over 10 years, that's $120 billion. Now, if the federal budget is destined to go up based on baseline budgeting over $240 billion, then the actual budget, including a sequester of $120 billion, which is the $1.2 trillion for 10 years divided by 10, the federal government's budget, even with sequester, is going to go up over $100 billion this year. Now, given that this is February and 1st of March, and they postponed it again to the 1st of March, the actual sequester is going to be about $42 to $50 billion for this year. Now, I know that that seems like a lot of money, but in a $3.6 trillion budget, it's a rounding error. It's a fraction of 1%. Point is that the administration is out there telling people that 600, 800,000 defense workers are going to lose their job. We're going to close the parks. There won't be people in the air traffic control towers. And in reality, none of that is true, because the actual federal budget expenditures are going to rise even with a sequester, and even if we took the entire $120 billion out in 1 year. I think it's misleading and the fear tactics to say we're going to do all these things when in fact the government is now saying, well, what we need is, in this sequester compromise, we need the rich to pay a little more. They want us to pay more income taxes. They wanted us to pay more income taxes to deal with the debt crisis at the beginning of the year. They're now talking in Washington about some of the things that might be eliminated to increase revenue or to tax the rich. One of those is the elimination of the mortgage interest deduction. Now, I want to discuss that, but I just want to go back and remind everybody that the president was doing all these things so that the rich would pay more, so that the middle class didn't have to pay anymore. He didn't point out to the American people that when January 1st came around and both Republicans and Democrats decided to reinstitute the payroll tax, that 77% of Americans saw a decline in their spendable income because they're now having to pay the suspended payroll tax. Now, one of the things that is being floated to eliminate with the idea that it will save $78 billion a year is the mortgage interest deduction. Now again, $78 billion out of a $3.6 trillion budget. Not a lot of money. But keep in mind that 66% of the people in America own their home. Many of them, like me and you, have a mortgage, and we're paying the interest and have been deducting it for all of the years that we've had it. So the middle class, again, is going to be affected if the administration gets its way of eliminating the mortgage interest deduction, far more than the top 1 or 2% of the taxpayers that the administration is going after. But a substantial portion of the middle class will again see their taxes rise because they'll have more income subject to tax with the elimination of the mortgage interest deduction. You know, this past weekend was Oscar weekend, and one of the movies that was nominated was Abraham Lincoln. A wonderful movie, and I hope you saw it. Lincoln said a very famous quote, and he said, you can fool all of the people some of the time, and you can fool some of the people all the time, but you can't fool all of the people all of the time. What I hope is happening here is that people begin to understand that sequester and all the threats and all of the closings that are typical every time we have a budget crisis are starting to get old with the American taxpayer. And I think that the middle class really woke up in January when they saw their paychecks shrink. And if we get the mortgage interest deduction eliminated and the charitable deduction eliminated, we're going to find that more of our income is going to be subject to tax, and we're going to be paying more and more income taxes, including the middle class. So the battle over sequester, it appears that, at least at the moment, this is being recorded on Monday, that both sides are going to allow it to happen, although the president seems to be pushing up his rhetoric to try and stop it from happening to get the Congress to compromise. I thought it was interesting, both the Congress and the president went on vacation within 9 days of the sequestered time frame. So that kind of tells me that at least the Congress wants to see these budget cuts. The administration, while using a lot of rhetoric, had time to go play golf with Tiger Woods and take a vacation in the face of what is supposedly, according to the administration, a great financial crisis. So watch and see what happens. I think the market is still trying to figure out if sequester really is going to be as bad as the administration is trying to make it to be, or is it going to be not quite as bad as it's trying to be made out to be. They're also looking at what will happen to the mortgage interest and the charitable deductions. Mortgage interest more than anything else because it affects the home builders and the banks and what will happen to the mortgage market and the real estate market. So it's going to be an interesting week to see how this plays out. I think the market is getting very toppy, and I wouldn't be surprised if that if sequester happens, it becomes the catalyst or the excuse for a pretty good correction in the market, maybe as much as 10 to 12%. We'll see. So that's all I have for now. If you have questions, please feel free to give me a call or send me an email. And again, if you have friends or relatives who are looking for help, looking for better returns, please feel free to give them my name and number. This is Dan Perkins, and thanks for watching.